Welcome to Fairfax County's EnviroPod. I'm Scott Coco. This is the podcast where we talk everything environment in our great county, especially efforts that our Department of Public Works and Environmental Services put in to ensure the safety and the lasting endurance of our environment here. In previous episodes, we've talked quite a bit about stormwater. We have talked with Megan Fellows and Dave England on different ways the county has been working to restore eroded streams in episodes 3 and 15. We've also talked with Danielle Wynn in episode 7 about watershed education and outreach. And I've also talked with Annie Shields with Cub Run Rec Center on watershed volunteer cleanups for stories here on Channel 16. And what we've learned from all of these people about how important the waters that flow through this county are and the human effects on what flows through it. Today I have with us Shannon Curtis, Chief of the Watershed Assessment Branch here within DPWES, and he's here to talk to us about the health of the watershed in Fairfax County and a new device that has been installed in Little Huntington Creek to help capture litter from the stream. Chief Curtis, how you doing? Welcome
Good.
To the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about what you do here with DPWES.
I've been in the Stormwater Planning Division for 21 years, actually before it was actually a division that got pulled out of the Utilities Group. I'm the branch chief. I oversee a group of environmental scientists, inspectors, biologists, ecologists, and we basically work to educate the public on what pollution issues. We inspect and make sure that active pollution, and we enforce certain ordinances that prevent pollution in the county. And we have a lot of ecologists who study the streams and the watersheds and the health of waterways and to help us understand them better so that we can actually manage them and try to keep them healthy. I've been doing that for a long time.
And how'd you get into this line of work?
Well, playing in creeks and streams as a kid in my backyard, being in the woods, I always loved being in the woods, and something about the stream aquatic life always drew me to it. I always found myself with a bucket and a pail and fishing frogs in a net, so I decided to pursue that as a professional in my education, and then my ideal job was to be out working in the waterways when I got out of college, and luckily enough, this was the first job I landed out of college and been here ever since.
From this area, or
yeah,
where are you
I grew
from?
Up here. Yep.
Whereabouts?
Manassas.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm kind of lived overseas a couple times, a few years, but yeah, this is pretty much my childhood home.
So you know the area, and we've talked a number of times about the different terrains and geological what is coming from West Virginia, Western Fairfax, and how it flows, and the water comes right through Fairfax County, and how that affects everything that comes through. What is the health of the streams, the watershed, and how is the county looking at the moment?
That's a great question. We've been looking at this extensively for the last 20 plus years. Back in 1999, the whole program kind of started with the Board of Supervisors asking Public Works, what is the health of our streams? Where are the good ones? Where are the bad ones? What makes them good? What makes them bad? We need a baseline understanding of the streams if we want to manage them. There was a lot of attention at that point in time on water quality and efforts to improve the bay and our local waterways. So they brought on a small group of ecologists, and we spent the next 2 years collecting biological, chemical, and physical data of the streams and the watersheds, preparing a report, and basically providing them with the synopsis and what to do, with a lot of recommendations. And what we found then is still true today. We haven't seen a lot of change. Basically, in a nutshell, about 3/4 of the streams in our county are considered fair, poor, or very poor health and condition.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so is that, certainly I imagine it's mostly human effects on the stream.
It certainly is.
And through construction and mostly stuff like, roads, construction, concrete. Is that the biggest cause of problems?
That's our current cause of problems, but when you take a step back and look at it at a larger time scale, we've been here impacting the landscape centuries now. So we first deforested it. We heavily overfarmed it. So we're kind of building on the latest round of impacts that humans have been doing to the land for a while. How we use the land, what we do on the land, is the biggest decider of water quality and the conditions of the streams. But yeah, what you have alluded to, which is the current developed condition of Fairfax County, it creates a lot of additional runoff. And those streams that are here, they formed and developed under a certain hydrologic regime. In other words, a certain amount of rainfall producing a certain amount of runoff. When you pave everything and cover it with impervious surfaces like parking lots, roadways, rooftops, driveways, shopping malls, everything you can think of, especially roads, that water can't get in the ground, and that generates a lot more surface water runoff when we have storm events. So now we have a lot more water coming into the streams, and the streams erode, and all of a sudden they become unstable. And so whenever you see a sudden amount of development in a drainage area, you typically see a response of the streams unraveling and eroding. And with that erosion and with that change in the water regime come a lot of ecological and physical ailments with the stream health.
So I know you'll be glad to know that I saw an interview with County Executive Brian Hill a while ago, and just a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about challenges and future and 5-year plans and stuff further down the line, and something he brought up right away, certainly with budgets and all that stuff, is what to do with stormwater. It was the first or second thing he brought up, and it was that, for people that don't pay attention, it was quite shocking, to just think of all the urbanization that's going on, and stuff like that, that what to do with stormwater was one of the top things that a county government official not involved with the EPWAS had brought up. I thought that was quite telling.
That's really great. It means partly we're doing a good job of communicating the issues to the leadership, but we've also been very, very lucky over my career here in the county as we've had very progressive leadership, taking the initiative, doing things before the mandates come from the federal government or from the local government, stepping out, knowing there's a problem, putting resources and time and energy into doing things ahead of time to be proactive, and it's paid dividends in our program, and that's really great to hear. I think I heard you mention that on Heather's interview when you talked with Heather a little bit about that, and I went back and looked for that. I got to find that and see what he said.
Yeah, it was eye-opening, and it was good to think that, because you sit in and as a producer we hear like the environmental committee that Mrs. Gross chairs, and you hear some of the land development services, public planning, and you hear that stuff there. But it was really interesting to hear as certainly looking into the future. Yeah. Because it also costs a lot of money afterwards when it causes a whole lot of damage. Yes. And being out there in the streams with Dave Anglin, seeing the effects of it all is, quite shocking also. Yeah. So what is your goal? What are some of the plans? Do you have how do we make, as someone at your level, what do we do to construct or make the streams better?
We wish there was a silver bullet, but as many complicated, complex problems, it's going to be a multifaceted approach to the problems, and some are irrevocable. I mean, there's some issues that, as you get more and more and more people on the landscape, you just kind of get past this point where you're not going to have a pristine stream there ever again, right? I mean, we can do a lot to help Mother Nature. We can do a lot to fix some of the really bad issues that we have, but in a Tyson's Corner type scenario, you're going to have a lot of drainage. You're going to have a very urban footprint, and so I think management has to be the way we manage our resources. We have to kind of be adaptive and flexible. In certain areas, it's way, way, way more effective to prevent these problems from happening or getting worse than it is to go and fix it, as you alluded to. So when we made our original recommendations with the stream protection baseline study back in 2001, kind of the first thing we did is we set the watersheds into 3 different categories. One is preserve. that's kind of like triaging. If it's good or if it's in decent shape, keep it that way. Then we had a management level 1 category where we said, these things are really degraded. You're going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time to try and fix them, even though they're the worst. And then we had a management level category where we said, hey, these are kind of in between. And these are the areas teetering between going from the good to the bad, and that's where you really want to probably focus. Unfortunately, a lot of our the regulations from the Clean Water Act and some of our the regulatory requirements kind of point us towards the worst ones first. So it's a little bit of a challenge managing, but a lot of it has to do with public education and awareness. I think people don't tend to care about things if they don't understand them. When they understand things, they tend to care. And so really a big part of my group, we do the investigations, we communicate to the public, both with the school kids and with the businesses that actually do things outside that could affect the quality of water coming off our landscape.
Does a lot of it also have a lot of coordination? I know Fairfax County has the challenge of we don't own our roads. And then so you've got the Department of Transportation creating something like the Springfield Mixing Bowl. Whole lot of concrete, whole lot of ramps, water going everywhere. But also the jurisdictions that we're connected to, you know, you've got Prince William, Loudoun, Arlington, right. Alexandria. How difficult is that coordination?
You know, it's always a challenge. Fortunately, we have organizations like the Northern Virginia Regional Commission that helps liaise between the communities. We have the Washington, D.C. Council of Governments, which is kind of a larger version of the Northern Virginia. And, you know, the reality is people tend to go off, and people, meaning organizations, tend to go off and work in their little worlds. And you have to stop and take time and step back and look at that you are a part of a quilt of larger jurisdictional, you know, our watersheds, which hopefully everybody knows what a watershed is by now, but, you know, the watershed is the area of land that drains to a particular part on a stream. So it's basically everything that if it rains, those are all the places that collect water that come to where you're standing at the stream. So, so our watersheds are kind of the units that we work by. And political jurisdictions don't respect watershed boundaries. So when it rains and goes this way, it may or may not be in Fairfax County. And so we have to really kind of work from the watershed perspective.
So we need to gerrymander the watershed.
There you go. That's it. I'm highly biased towards watershed boundaries for political boundaries. Makes it a lot easier, too.
Watersheds don't vote either,
right.
So maybe...
Yeah, they don't have a voice. But it actually makes it a lot easier when you're trying to manage a resource, when you, obviously, it's, you know, the fewer a number of jurisdictions and entities. But really, watershed management is really about bringing everybody in. When we did the watershed management plans about 10 to 15 years ago, these were kind of huge synopsis of where we are in terms of the condition of the watersheds and then what we need to do, what the prescription is. And there were, I think, 1,900 projects recommended out of the plans for areas of opportunity identified in the plans, and a large part of that was public involvement, stakeholder involvement, not only to develop the plans, but as we go out and actually implement some of the fixes, both structural and non-structural fixes, you need to incorporate the business community, the schools, the faith-based communities, the residential. Everybody has a stake in it, and some people just need to be aware, you know, they need to be awoken a little bit. 'Cause a lot of things people don't really see the stuff that I see every day to day when I look and say, oh, that's not draining right, or, you know, look at that stream, it doesn't look healthy. People don't necessarily always think about that, but if you come to them and give them information, people always want to do the right thing.
So someone with your career history and your knowledge of everything, tell me, what scares you the most about the current situation? But what also gives you hope?
Ooh, tough question. I guess what keeps me up at night a little bit is that, like I mentioned before, there's some things that the damage is kind of final. You know, nature is incredibly resilient, right? So, you know, maybe in 200 years, the streams that look horrendous right now, with the right management, nature can come back and do what it needs to do. But it's the kind of the irrevocable damage that occurs to the landscape that kind of keeps me up. The mixing bowl, the beltway, the 66 that's completely expanded as far as it possibly can get now, and the only place to go now is start stacking roads on top of each other like they do out west. So once you see natural land converted to an intense human use, that's kind of the end of the story. It doesn't usually go back, right? Usually you don't see buildings torn down and meadows planted, even though we've had a few little opportunities to do that. So to me, it's just kind of the change that is permanent, that kind of keeps me up. And it's difficult. People are really struggling as they develop their properties what to do with this stormwater. They just don't have where to put it, especially as we get more and more built out. The land becomes very valuable. I don't want to put a stormwater pond there because I can make a lot more money if I put a house there. So everything's going underground. They're really, really stretching the limits of what we do with this additional water. What gives me hope is that there is so much energy around it now, and it's become much more public in terms of people caring about the health of the waterways, people being interested. The Chesapeake Bay pollution budget, the plan to clean up the bay, has generated an incredible amount of energy from all levels, states, localities, the federal government, farmers. I mean, it's driving the regulations, and so there's so much more attention on stormwater now that really gives me hope that there will continue to head in the right direction, because in the past, stormwater was just looked at as a kind of an afterthought, like, oh yeah, when it rains, we got to do something with this water. Let's just get it over here to the stream. And now it should be more fundamental when we plan a site. Hey, the stormwater can be an amenity. Maybe we can save this rain, or we can create a water feature. Or how do we deal with it rather than treating it as like waste?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I know the human impact on where stormwater goes and all the concrete and everything is probably progressing, but how about the environmental cleanliness of how it's been? I know, 30 years ago the Chesapeake Bay was a huge issue, and hopefully that's gotten cleaner than it was before. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, there's an incredible amount of energy and time and effort that's been put into fixing the bay. There's definitely strong signs of improvement at the bay level, and locally, I think there's a lot more rules and regulations that are on development and on how we run our society, really. And I think it's one of those things that you can go and fix something, but you may not notice the effects for 10, 50 years. How long does it, it's not like Field of Dreams in the baseball field where if you build it, they'll come, right? I want critters, I want good, healthy biota in the stream, so I'm going to engineer a stream that I think is perfect for them. Well, maybe they'll come, maybe they won't. Maybe it'll take them 50 years. We found out with our wastewater treatment plant that discharges into Pohick Bay and into Gunston Cove that you turn the tap off of all the nutrients and pollutants that were causing the problems in the river, and it took us 10 years to work all of that stuff out of the system before we saw a response in the submerged grasses and the health of those estuaries. So I get concerned that people may get discouraged because of the lag time effect. We spent all this money. Where's the result? Where's the effect? And with nature and with these, the natural world, it's not always quite immediate. So hopefully, people have the long-term vision to see that those changes should come.
So tell me a little bit about the project that you wanted to bring and talk to us today. I did a little bit of research on some of the stuff you sent me, but tell me about what's going on down in Little Huntington.
So this is the first of its kind in Fairfax County, and it's generated a lot of interest, as it should. It's called it's a stream trash trap that collects floating litter from the stream, and without seeing it, even with seeing it, a lot of people don't understand how it works. So I'll try to kind of provide a real simplistic view of it. If you can imagine a floating skimmer, Okay, the stream flows. This thing has big floating boom arms that kind of start in the stream banks, and they kind of form a V into the middle of the stream, but they're on the surface of the stream. So as the stream rises from runoff, the boom floats up and it floats down. And when trash floats along the surface and hits these booms, it gets funneled into this basket at the bottom, at the downstream end. And if that basket fills up with all these floatable litter and debris, then it just builds up behind the boom upstream, right? So it doesn't overflow. It basically is a very effective trap for what we call floatables. So floatables is a made-up word that we like to use, and it basically is litter that tends to float on the surface of water. Plastic bags, water bottles, styrofoam cups were a huge one. I think we're seeing less of those and a lot more of the water bottles, the Gatorade bottles. And so Little Hunting Creek, as some of you may know, is along the Route 1 corridor. So is probably one of the most densely human trafficked, both pedestrian and just, cars, pedestrian traffic, lots of high density residential and commercial. So there's a really strong human presence there in a dense numbers. And
a lot of streams and parks over in that area too. So
right, and fortunately, we had we had leadership a long time ago who had the wisdom to kind of put those things aside and say, let's leave this stuff aside for future use, for enjoyment. But in that area, it's an older part of the county, and there are a lot of litter issues that prevail through that corridor. A lot of it is windswept from the roadways. There's a lot of bus stops. There could be overflowing trash cans and dumpsters. There's just a lot of, it's kind of notorious for being one of the more littered areas in the entire county. And so we were looking for areas that we could pilot some new technology that we saw, which is this floating trash tap called a Bandalong. They started developing them in Australia about 30 years ago, and the first one's still in operation. It's a very simple machine. They're very durable. There's no moving parts that need to be, it's passive. It doesn't need electricity. It doesn't need solar. It doesn't need gasoline. It's literally just a floating funnel that sits on top of the stream. The trick is keeping it maintained so it doesn't clog, because once you build up clogs, you can get logs, debris, it can break. There's a lot of maintenance is really the big key with this thing. But we wanted to try some litter reduction techniques for stormwater. And this was a really interesting one that we saw that really had a lot of promise. Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia has several of them installed. Montgomery County has one on the Prince George's has one on the Anacostia River, and they were kind of forced into doing something about their litter. We wanted to take, again, a proactive approach and do something before we were told to. Right. And we wanted to pilot this technology because we've never done it before. We want to know what we're getting into. We're not going to run out and put 20 of them out there. So we started what we're calling a pilot, and we want to see what are the maintenance aspects of this thing. Currently, we plan to go out there every week and check it. You never know when it might clog. We're also planning on going out after any major rain events, because you'd be surprised the amount of litter in that stream that can build up after one rain event. I mean, all you have to do is walk the stream corridor, and anywhere there's a fallen log, you will see a large amount of floatables. So it's called a Bandalong. That's the proprietary name, but we had it specifically designed and installed for Little Hunting Creek.
And then how often does that get cleaned out, or how do you collect the trash out of it?
Well, we think we know, but we're gonna find out. The plan is, and we've been on site and met with the construction contractor. The designers were out there, the folks like me who planned it and found it, and potential trash collection contractors. The plan is, and the stream's only about knee deep, so it's not a real drowning hazard, but a person or two would be in chest waders. They would go out there, and they either manually empty it and convey it up the bank, or you can actually have a boom arm that can actually pick up the basket and then dump it into but it's probably going to be manual at first, and we'll have to, by and large, the maintenance is going to be the long-term effort and cost with this thing.
Do you see other streams that this would be useful for in the county?
Yeah, I would be lying if I said no. There definitely are other streams that are suffering from litter. The real trick is finding one with ideal conditions to install something like this. Once you get a certain amount of flow over a certain velocity, these things, they don't recommend them. So if we have a higher gradient stream, like Little Hunting Creek is a very slow, sluggish stream. Doesn't have a lot of force. Even when it rains, it's very slow. Some of our other streams are more high gradient, and we may get a lot more debris, and then you may get a lot more forces on that, kind of bending it, pushing it. So there definitely are good candidates in terms of their need. It's how well can we apply this technology. So right now we're keeping our fingers crossed and watching it, but it was only in for a few days when we went out and did our site visit, and it had already collected a lot of litter. So it's good. Unfortunately, this is just a Band-Aid. We're collecting the litter. We're not stopping the litter from occurring.
Right.
And that's not always people throwing wrappers on the ground. A lot of it is inadvertent. We may have poorly maintained trash disposal areas. I don't know about you, but every time I would put my recycling out on the curb when I lived in town, that was the windiest night of the week.
Sure.
And you come out there the next morning and half of your recycling's gone.
I used to say it used to always rain on Monday nights.
Yep.
It didn't matter. Monday night it was going to rain, so you'd put the newspapers out there, and it was.
Yeah, if you want it to rain, wash your car. That's what I always say. Because, and so, and you could really see the effects of this in neighborhoods when there's a really windy night or when things are not really covered. And the trash companies really don't like you to cover those because it's difficult for their collection guys to uncover and then get it. Usually they just grab them, throw them in, and run down the road. So, and usually they're undersized. I don't know about you, but mine was I always had more recycling because I recycle everything I can. Then I had room in my bins. I had to order more bins. Also, dumpsters, commercial areas, shopping centers, a lot of, if they do provide trash receptacles, sometimes they're full, sometimes the lids blow off. So it's not just, bad people throwing litter on the ground, but there's a multitude of sources. But, really, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
So what are some of the things that that you'd want to relay to folks about stormwater, some of your concerns, and what folks can do to help?
That's great, and that's usually where we end up when we go out with our outreach efforts, depending on whether it's school-age children or it's a business owner or a residential community. We do a lot of different things to try and help the health of the watersheds. Some of it is procedural. Some of it is, physical. We do go and restore streams. We do a lot of monitoring, and we like to understand where things are going. But a lot of times people say, well, what can I do? I can't, what can I do? And so there's a lot of things that you can do. Your choices impact your environment more than you probably think. Reduce, reuse, recycle. That probably is one of the greatest concepts to try and convey how to lessen your footprint. Even before you recycle, it's always in that order, right? You don't have to recycle if if you're not using something because you've reduced your use. Or reusing it, you don't even have to recycle it because it's getting used over and over again. So a lot of people don't see the hierarchy there of that. But so we always encourage.
Well, they jump right to recycle.
Exactly, and that's natural. I don't know why, but I'm automatic. And as you talk with Eric Forbes, you understood. There's a lot of challenges with recycling. It's not just like it's easy to do the right thing because it's usually hard to do the right thing. So. Reducing your footprint, we always tell people you really should reduce use of pesticide, herbicide, and fertilizers in your yard. Either reduce it or just don't use them at all. If you really, really have to use fertilizer, we say fertilize in the fall. You should never fertilize right before it rains because that immediately runs off. And believe it or not, people don't realize it, but some of the largest pollutants in our waterways are nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. That's what's really hurting the bay. It's not like gasoline or some toxic metal. It's actually nutrients for life, but they're being overstimulated.
Well, and when people think about pollution, they think about the pictures of the smokestacks or chemical companies or what was in the civil action. They had a varnish that they were putting on materials, and so, but it's actually little bit more innocent than that.
It is.
Right?
And there's multiple things hurting our streams, and I don't want to get into it too much, but most of it is from when the rain hits the ground, that washes the landscape into the stream. So when it rains, I always say the stream and the landscape become unified. They become one. And a lot of things we do on the landscape when it's not raining actually are going to impact it when it does rain because it washes off. But things that people can do is around their homes, if they have a home, they can harvest the rain, they can collect it in a rain barrel, and you can reuse it. And that's you're reducing runoff that's going out into your backyard stream. Use it to water your plants when it's hot. You're also saving water because you're not using the water from the tap. We like to encourage people to consider joining Friends of clubs. You know, we've got the Friends of Accotink Creek or Friends of Difficult Run who are local community members that advocate for the health of their stream. We like to encourage people to participate in stream cleanups. There's a lot to choose from. Yeah. I think I heard you talking about
I went
on
to
your
one last fall at Cub Run Rec Center, and
Yep.
we went all up and down the Cub Run Stream Valley Park.
Yep.
And they pulled couches out.
Oh,
and,
man.
and just tons of bags of trash, and it was really, really interesting because they also have a program with Virginia Tech where they're monitoring. They logged every single piece of trash that they took in because they can monitor what types of trash and how often. And apparently, some of it is actually getting a lot cleaner than it was before. And I tell you, right now, during these odd times, people are now walking and doing more stuff, and I think they see a lot more of that stuff out there, and I see people bringing trash bags out with them and cleaning up too. So
that's kind of what we're trying to teach our children today is like, you know, if you walk by something that that's there that shouldn't be, there's no reason you can't pick it up and make it a better place, right? The other things that we try to encourage folks to do is get out and get to the stream valley. Just go explore it. Learn more about the stream corridor. Learn about the watershed that you live in. Again, as people tend to be familiar with things, they tend to care more about them. And lastly, we kind of like to, anywhere that you can reduce impervious surface in your little world where you live, and if that means gravel driveway instead of paved driveway, or if that means I'm not going to put this big patio in my backyard, maybe I'll do a deck. Because it can get, you know, any reduction that you can do and have a more natural ground where the water can get in, every little bit helps.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I really I want to have you back on.
I could talk for a long time.
Yeah. Well, it certainly seems that there are many topics. I'm always fascinated by the science behind it because I grew up and really, unless you go out and see your reservoir or the stream in the back. It's the storm water and where it goes when it rains, other than, watching it, go down to the gutter to the sewer, you don't think about it. Right. And so I always found this really fascinating on what is flowing underneath Fairfax County and how it's affected. And I appreciate all that you do and what your team does. It was really interesting being out there with Dave Englund, being out there.
You got to go out with him, so that's
knee
good.
Deep in Backlick Run, freezing our butts off, right, Marco?
Oh, you went to Backlick. You saw the really bad spot. Did he take you to the really bad spot?
Yeah.
One thing before I go, I remember my colleague Danielle Wynn. She works in my group. I think you interviewed her. She does amazing work with the schools in outreach. And she said, one thing I always like to tell people is just the fundamental thing is that when it rains and it goes into that drain in the road, it's not going to a sewer treatment plant. It's not getting any kind of cleaning. That's just a conduit to get it off the road. It's going to end up in your stream where things live. So, fundamentally, that's what we need to be people to understand.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And the days where people just flicking their cigarette butts, and, that's got to go somewhere, or dumping their medicine or whatever. So. Really appreciate you coming on. We're going to have you back on, and hopefully you can compete with Eric Forbes. He tends to get the most viewership of our.
He's a pretty charismatic guy.
Yeah. He talks. We have to. Everyone likes to hear about the recycling, but we need to push the, reduce, reuse before the recycling.
Exactly.
Too. So we appreciate all that you do, and thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
So that's it for this edition of EnviroPod. So you can go onto the DPWES website to find more information about our stormwater and the watersheds here in the county. And so I want to thank Chief Shannon Curtis for coming us and joining us today. And of course, all the folks throughout DPWES that support our county, thank you for what you do. If you'd like to send us any questions or comments on the show, please send a message to swpdmail@fairfaxcounty.gov. And then you can listen to EnviroPod on a number of different formats, pretty much any podcast format it's on. SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and of course the Fairfax County webpage under podcasts and the DPWES website. So I want to thank my friend Irene Haske for setting all this up. She sets up all the interviews and permits us to do this show. And then, of course, our great staff here at Channel 16 that make all of this happen. So for Fairfax County's EnviroPod, I'm Scott Coco. We'll see you next time.